Elijah stood in the middle of the dimly lit studio, his heart racing as the cameras rolled. The room was silent, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, making every small movement feel louder than it should. Tonight wasn't just another discussion. It was a face-to-face encounter with someone who had redefined the way the world thought about technology. Amara Sterling, the visionary CEO of Hypernova Industries. But this wasn't about tech. It was about something far deeper, a topic that made people uncomfortable yet irresistibly curious. Faith and the meaning of life. Amara walked in, her confidence almost tangible. She was known for her logical mind, a brilliant thinker who had a reputation for dismantling arguments with ease. Elijah, on the other hand, wasn't here to win an argument. He was here to stand for what he believed, knowing full well the challenge ahead. As the lights brightened and the countdown began, Elijah took a deep breath. The first question was a bold one, catching even Amara off guard. What do you think drives human purpose? Science or something greater? Elijah asked, his voice steady but charged with emotion. Amara paused, a rare hesitation from someone so articulate. The silence in that moment was deafening, as if the air itself was waiting for her response. But just as Amara opened her mouth to speak, the power flickered, plunging the studio into near darkness. Gasps rippled through the small audience, and a strange stillness settled in the room. Somewhere in that silence it became clear, this conversation was about more than just beliefs. Something unexpected was unfolding, and neither Elijah nor Amara could predict what would happen next. Elijah blinked as the room settled into a tense, shadowy glow. Emergency lights cast long, eerie reflections on the walls, giving the studio an almost surreal quality. The crew scrambled to check the equipment, murmuring about what could have caused the sudden outage. Amara stood perfectly still, her face half illuminated, her sharp eyes flicking toward Elijah as if searching for answers. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Elijah shrugged, his mind racing to make sense of the interruption. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, as though the universe itself had pressed pause on their discussion. This wasn't part of the plan, and he could sense that the audience, both in the studio and those watching online, were hanging on to every second, waiting for what came next. In an effort to ease the growing tension, Elijah leaned closer to the microphone. "Well," he said with a faint smile, "I guess even the power grid couldn't handle the weight of this conversation." A ripple of nervous laughter came from the audience, but Amara didn't join in. She crossed her arms, her focus sharp. "This isn't random," she muttered, almost to herself. The flickering light brought memories rushing back to Elijah, moments when life had thrown him off course, forcing him to question everything he thought he knew. He wondered if Amara had ever faced such moments, or if she had always hidden behind the cold logic of her intellect. The tension between them wasn't just about their differing worldviews. It was personal, charged with unspoken stories and emotions neither was ready to reveal. One of the crew members interrupted the silence, announcing that the power issue would take some time to resolve. Amara turned to Elijah, her curiosity breaking through her composed exterior. "You believe this is more than coincidence, don't you?" she asked, her tone almost accusing. Elijah hesitated, caught between wanting to engage and the gnawing feeling that something larger was at play. "Maybe it is," he admitted, his voice quieter now. "Or maybe it's just a reminder of how fragile everything we rely on really is." The words seemed to linger in the air, heavy with meaning neither of them could fully grasp. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with questions, doubts, and the unshakable sense that whatever came next would change everything. Amara didn't take her eyes off Elijah, the faint flicker of the emergency lights casting sharp shadows across her face. There was something in her expression, a mix of curiosity and challenge. "Fragile," she repeated, tilting her head. That's an interesting choice of words coming from someone who claims to believe in an unshakable higher power. Elijah met her gaze, his calm demeanor barely hiding the storm within. "It's not the higher power that's fragile," he said quietly. "It's us. Our systems, our assumptions, our control over anything in this world. They're all temporary." His words hung in the air like a challenge, one that Amara wasn't willing to ignore. The hum of generators kicked in, and the studio's equipment buzzed back to life. Relief swept through the crew, but neither Amara nor Elijah acknowledged the change. They were locked in their debate, the atmosphere between them as charged as ever. "You talk about fragility as if faith is the answer," Amara said, her voice sharp now. "But faith is just another system people cling to when they can't explain something. It's no more reliable than anything science hasn't yet figured out." Her words struck like a well-aimed blow, but Elijah didn't flinch. "It's not about what's reliable," he replied, leaning forward. "It's about what's real. And sometimes, what's real can't always be measured or quantified. Don't you ever feel it? Something bigger than logic, something that science can't touch." His question wasn't just directed at her. It seemed to echo into the room, resonating with the unspoken thoughts of those watching. Amara hesitated, just for a moment, before shaking her head. "What I feel doesn't matter. What matters is what we can prove, what we can use to make this world better. Relying on anything else is just dangerous." Her words carried a conviction that didn't match the flicker of doubt in her eyes, a doubt Elijah was quick to catch. The crew signaled for them to resume the conversation, but neither moved to take their places. Elijah studied her, wondering what moments in her life had hardened her so much against the idea of faith. At the same time, he felt the weight of his own unspoken questions. What if she was right? What if all of this, the power outage, the debate, was just coincidence? Or worse, meaningless? As they finally returned to their seats, the tension in the studio felt even thicker. The debate was no longer about abstract ideas or philosophical arguments. It had become personal, a battle not just between two opposing views, but between two people trying to reconcile their own doubts and beliefs. And somewhere in the silence that followed, Elijah felt it, a shift, subtle yet undeniable, as if something unseen had begun to stir. The audience leaned forward in their seats, waiting for the next exchange, while both Elijah and Amara braced themselves for whatever truths, or lies, might come next. Amara took a slow breath, her eyes never leaving Elijah's. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with anticipation. The audience was silent, every person holding their breath, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes debate. Elijah could feel the weight of their gazes, the unspoken questions hanging between them like a heavy fog. "Perhaps," Elijah began cautiously, "but what if the answers we seek aren't meant to be found solely through logic and reason? What if there's a part of our existence that transcends what we can measure or understand?" His voice was steady, yet there was a hint of vulnerability that hadn't been there before. Amara leaned forward, her expression intense. "Elijah, I respect your perspective, but relying on something intangible can lead to chaos. Without a solid foundation, how do we build a better future? How do we solve the real problems facing humanity?" Her words were sharp, each one meticulously chosen to challenge his beliefs. Before Elijah could respond, the studio lights began to flicker again, this time more erratically. A collective gasp swept through the audience as the room plunged into intermittent darkness. The uncertainty in the air was palpable, heightening the tension between the two debaters. "Is this another test?" Elijah asked, his eyes darting around the room. "A sign that there's more to this conversation than we initially thought?" His question was rhetorical, yet it resonated deeply with the unease everyone felt. Amara's jaw tightened. Whether it's a test or not, we can't let external factors derail our discussion. We need to stay focused on the issues at hand. Her determination was unwavering, but there was a flicker of doubt that momentarily clouded her usually composed demeanor. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from backstage, causing both Elijah and Amara to jump. The audience tensed, unsure of what had just occurred. Security personnel rushed to investigate, leaving the main floor in a state of heightened alert. The interruption only deepened the mystery surrounding their debate, leaving everyone wondering if there was more at play than just differing viewpoints. Elijah seized the moment, his voice cutting through the remaining tension. Maybe these interruptions are a metaphor for the chaos we face when we let fear dictate our beliefs. Whether it's faith or science, we need to find common ground to navigate the uncertainties of our world. Amara paused, absorbing his words. The flickering lights seemed to mirror the turmoil within her, the internal conflict between her steadfast reliance on logic and the growing realization that there might be aspects of existence beyond her understanding. The room held its collective breath, the suspense reaching its peak as both debaters stood on the precipice of a revelation that could change everything. As the lights stabilized and the crew signaled that the technical issues were resolved, Elijah and Amara exchanged a long, meaningful glance. The unresolved tension between them was now intertwined with the mysteries unfolding around them. The audience was left in suspense, eagerly awaiting the next chapter of this gripping confrontation, unsure of where the path would lead but certain that something profound was about to unfold. The room steadied, but the air remained electric with tension. Amara straightened in her seat, her expression unreadable. Elijah, sensing an opportunity to press deeper, leaned forward. "Amara," he said, his voice calm but deliberate, "you've built your life on evidence, on things you can prove. But doesn't it ever feel incomplete? Like there's something missing?" Before she could answer, a crew member hurried onto the stage, whispering something to the director. The exchange was brief, but whatever had been said left the director visibly unsettled. He glanced toward Amara and Elijah, then back at the audience, as though weighing whether to share the information. Amara noticed the shift immediately. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone sharp, breaking the uneasy silence. The director hesitated, then approached the two of them cautiously. "We've received a message," he said, keeping his voice low, though the audience could sense something was happening. "It's strange. It's addressed to both of you, but we don't know where it came from." Elijah exchanged a quick glance with Amara, both of them visibly intrigued. "A message?" Elijah asked. "From who?" The director hesitated again. "We're not sure. It just appeared on our monitors in the control room. It says, 'Ask the right question.'" The cryptic nature of the message sent a ripple of unease through the studio. Amara scoffed, crossing her arms. "Probably a prank," she said, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. Elijah frowned, his thoughts racing. "Or maybe it's not," he countered softly, his mind turning over the possibilities. The director handed them a printed copy of the message, the bold black letters stark against the white page. Amara stared at it, her rational mind searching for an explanation. "If this is someone's idea of a joke, it's a poor one," she said, though the unease in her voice betrayed her. Elijah, however, couldn't shake the feeling that the message was significant. He looked up at Amara, his expression steady but serious. "What if it's a challenge?" he suggested. "What if it's about more than just debating each other? Maybe we're being asked to look beyond our differences." Amara's brow furrowed, her mind grappling with the idea. But before she could respond, the lights dimmed once more. This time the outage wasn't total, but a strange, rhythmic pulsing filled the room, accompanied by faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The audience murmured nervously, some looking around, others glued to the unfolding scene. Amara's logical mind raced to find an explanation, but there was none. For the first time, she found herself at a loss, the certainty she relied on slipping through her fingers. "What's happening?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Elijah turned to her, his expression calm despite the growing tension. "Maybe," he said quietly, "we're finally being asked to stop looking for answers and start asking the right questions." The whispers grew louder, a strange and unsettling sound that seemed to be forming words neither of them could quite understand. The stakes had shifted once again, leaving everyone in the room wondering whether this debate was ever truly about logic versus faith, or if it was about something much bigger. The whispers swirled around the studio, growing louder, almost tangible, until they stopped as abruptly as they had begun. The room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft hum of the equipment. Amara's hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. For once, her sharp, logical mind was failing her. She looked at Elijah, her eyes wide with something between disbelief and fear. What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elijah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood, his movements slow and deliberate, as if afraid that even the slightest sound might shatter the fragile tension. He turned toward the audience, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "We've spent this entire evening arguing about what's real, about what can or can't be proven," he said. "But maybe this moment is here to remind us of something greater, something neither science nor faith alone can explain." Amara stood as well, her posture tense. "You think this, whatever this is proof of something? What if it's just a technical glitch or some elaborate hoax?" Her voice wavered, betraying the cracks in her usually unshakable demeanor. Before Elijah could respond, the screens in the studio flickered to life, displaying a series of rapid, random images: stars, oceans, human faces, ancient ruins. The images were interspersed with a single, recurring phrase: "Asterisk, look closer." Asterisk gasps rippled through the audience, and even the most skeptical among them couldn't deny the strangeness of the moment. Amara's breath caught. For the first time, she didn't have an answer. She turned to Elijah, her voice softer now. "What do you think it means?" Elijah hesitated, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "I think," he said finally, "it's telling us that the answers we're searching for, about life, purpose, faith, they're not out there." He gestured vaguely toward the screens. "They're in here." He placed a hand over his heart, his gaze steady on Amara. Amara's lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. The screens blinked off, leaving only their reflections staring back at them. The director's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing that everything was back to normal and they could continue. But neither Elijah nor Amara moved. The final twist came not from the debate, but from within. Amara, the woman who had spent her life dissecting facts and dismantling faith, found herself questioning the very foundation of her beliefs. And Elijah, so certain of his convictions, realized that perhaps he, too, had been searching for answers in all the wrong places. As the audience watched, the two stood in silence, their differences momentarily dissolved by the shared mystery of the moment. It wasn't a resolution anyone had expected, but it was one that left a lasting impression. In the end, the debate wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finding the courage to ask the right questions. Even if the answers remained unknown, the tension in the room began to ease as the lights stabilized and the faint hum of the equipment filled the silence. Amara and Elijah remained standing, their eyes meeting in a moment of quiet understanding. Neither spoke for a long time, and the audience, sensing the weight of what had just unfolded, stayed silent as well. Finally, Amara broke the stillness, her voice softer, almost vulnerable. "Maybe," she said hesitantly, "it's not about having all the answers. Maybe it's about being willing to explore the questions, no matter where they lead." Her words carried none of the sharp certainty that had defined her earlier arguments. Instead, they were filled with the tentative steps of someone beginning to see the world differently. Elijah nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "That's the thing about faith," he replied. "It doesn't eliminate doubt. It coexists with it. And maybe science and logic aren't so different. They're both ways of seeking truth, even if the paths don't always overlap." His voice was steady, but his words carried a newfound humility, as though the night had taught him something as well. The director gestured for them to wrap up, but neither seemed in a hurry. Elijah turned to the audience, his gaze sweeping over their expectant faces. "Tonight wasn't about proving anyone right or wrong," he said. "It was about starting a conversation, one that challenges us to think, to question, and to connect. Whatever you take away from this, let it inspire you to keep searching." Amara stepped forward, her usual confidence tempered by a hint of something deeper. "And maybe," she added, her voice carrying an uncharacteristic warmth, "we don't have to choose between logic and faith. Maybe they're two sides of the same coin, each helping us navigate the mysteries of life in their own way." The audience erupted into applause, a wave of relief and appreciation washing over the room. As the lights brightened and the crew moved to wrap up the broadcast, Elijah extended a hand toward Amara. She hesitated only for a moment before shaking it, the gesture carrying a sense of mutual respect and understanding. As the studio emptied and the night stretched on, both Elijah and Amara walked away with more questions than answers. But perhaps, they realized, that was the point. The journey wasn't about finding certainty, it was about embracing the search. And for the first time, they both felt at peace with the unknown.